Hey, hello. Okay. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So we're just waiting for a few people to join and then we will start. Hola, hola.
Hello.
Ah, yes. Instagram is sending the notifications. All right. Natalie,
Yeah,
you
I'm
want
here.
to?
You know, see me?
Not so much. You look a little fuzzy. Okay, yeah. You look better. You look better. You look better. All right. I think we give one more minute and then we start. One more.
Sure.
Hola, hola. Mm. Okay, yes. That's better. I see the light. I see the light. Ah, see the light. All right. All right. So let's start. So welcome to Life and Godliness with Dr. Joe. We're starting back. It's been a while. It's been a while. It's been a while. But Life and Godliness with Dr. Joe is all about, life and godliness, figuring out life and godliness with Jesus and community. And today I have my sister friend, Natalie Graham. And, you know, we have known each other like, what, how long? Life.
Yes.
All my life, and she really has been a constant in my life. And I really thought, based on the topic, that I really wanted her to start with me. And to be honest, I was like, I really wanted to be a part and to come on and have some different conversations with me about life. And she was like, sure. And so I was like, great. I was like, this is gonna be the first topic. And she's like, sure. So, I'm super, super grateful to have her with me, and just looking forward to the conversation and sharing, and just seeing where this conversation takes us. Hope we're really trusting that persons will experience hope and healing, and maybe experience some laughter as we bring our authentic selves. Natalie is somebody who loves stories. She's a storyteller, so she tells stories through work. She's telling stories with her friends because she believes in laughter, and that's why people love to hang around her, right? Because laughter, and it's through pain, so it's like through some painful stuff. Not easy things, but because of who she is and who God has made her to be, we are able to laugh and cry through things. And so, again, just really wanted to talk about this topic, and really hoping to hear from persons as we speak in the chat, and if there are any questions at the end, we will take them. So, miscarriage is a deeply personal experience, and I like the responses to miscarriage can vary, and but each response, each reaction, how we process it is real and valid. And for me, so I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about my experience. So I recently had a miscarriage at the beginning of this year. And to be honest, when I was publicizing the event, I didn't speak much about it because I wasn't actually sure how I would be. I mean, I was feeling fine, but my wise friends tell me that this, in dealing with miscarriage, it comes in waves. And so I wanted to be able to honor that and listen to that and be able to listen to how I felt at the time and determine whether or not I felt strong enough to talk about it. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of my experience and some of my lessons, and then we're going to delve into Natalie's own experience and her own journey and some of what she would have learned, and how God showed up for her in her process. So um, when it was in November, my husband and I, around that time, we wanted to have another child. We felt like God was talking to us about it for some time and felt like this was the time. And so we went on that journey, and I found out I was pregnant. So took the test. I think my last pregnancy, it was very, very faint, but this one was very, very present. And so I was like, okay, I'm pregnant, right? And the journey started out, the weeks that went, I didn't feel anything. So unlike my last pregnancy, I was like, yes, thank you, Jesus. No, I'm so sorry. I mean, I guess I'm a little ignorant. I should have known, right? But I didn't reach the 6 week mark. So at the 6 week mark, well, just up until that point, I started to feel a little nausea here and there. But I'm like, no man, John, is your head, because you're so focused on being happy that you're not getting sick, that you're tricking yourself into believing that you're actually sick. But no, by the time I was 6 weeks, I recognized, no, you're not tricking yourself. This is really happening. And so my pregnancy symptoms are, terrible. But um, are terrible, but I'll skip most of that part to say I was really experiencing all the symptoms that I was familiar with. Um, you know, Screens, not being able to watch screens, etc. And so in my mind, I was having a very normal pregnancy. And I must say, I think there were a lot of assumptions on my part. I think my last two pregnancies, I went to the doctor when I was about 9 weeks, 10 weeks. So this time, I went to the doctor when I was almost 11 weeks. So I'm there with my husband, and he doesn't always come with me, to be honest, in the past, but he came this time. And, lying down, getting ready to look at the little, being in my tummy. And the doctor put what is it called, Natz? I don't know, the
What you're
ultrasound
getting?
thing.
Yeah, to
What is it?
get the sonogram.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
On my tummy, and it was empty. So I'm like, by now I know that there's supposed to be a baby in there, and I'm 11 weeks, so it's the baby's should be far along, and there was no baby. And I was shocked, to be honest. And my doctor was quietly investigating, and through the ultrasound, it looked as though she had found the baby elsewhere. So based on what the ultrasound presented, she sent me for emergency surgery. And I went through the emergency surgery. They had essentially told me that there were two possibilities. It could be an ectopic pregnancy, or it could be a potential miscarriage. After the surgery, they had taken out a sac out of my ovary, but they weren't quite sure what it was, and so they had to send it to the lab to be tested. Um, so that was, I went into surgery the Thursday, I came out the Sunday, and then on the Wednesday, I was sleeping, and I started to, I started to feel a bit of cramping, and just felt very uneasy, and and that happened for about 4 hours, and then eventually I went to the bathroom and passed the sack. Now, for the surgery, I kind of went on. I was making jokes. I was running up about, and but this time it was a bit more emotional for me. You know, and I think it took me by surprise. I wasn't, I didn't expect it, you know? And so it really took me by surprise. And the next day, you know, I'm going on, I'm okay. And I had amazing support. Everybody calls me every day, etc. And I remember feeling like my husband, because of course he's attending to the kids now. And I just felt so alone, like I wanted some attention. And I don't know, he was doing something, and this was like in the middle of the night. And I just got so angry. I had my phone and I just flung it on the floor, and you know, he was actually stunned, right? And I think so was I, but I could feel the anger building up inside of me. And I just did a cry ball, angry everything, you know, and just let it out. Um, and you know, after that, you know, I kind of moved on, and you know, I just felt like okay, I got it out and moved on. And I think it was maybe about 2 weeks later, I got an update about what actually happened with me. And so at that point, I found out I did not have an ectopic pregnancy. I actually had what was called a blighted ovum, and what they actually took out of my ovary was a cyst, and that cyst, thank God, was malignant. But to be honest, when I first heard it, I was so annoyed. I called Natalie, I messaged Natalie, because I was just like, I'm so annoyed. This is not what it's supposed to be. Like, you know, it's like, and then what happened was I had updated everybody already, and I was just like, I'm gonna have to update everybody again. I just couldn't bother. I don't know, that was shallow, but that's just where I was, right? I'm just being honest. And so, you know, but after that, I mean, I kind of took the day to process, and you know, I cried and stuff, and then kind of walked through. And I mean, what was interesting for me, and in an interesting thing for me was that while I thought I was pregnant, because even when they tested me, my pregnancy hormones were high, right? I um you know, I would be sharing with people, you know, oh, you know, I'm pregnant, da, 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 da. And you know, I know persons we don't normally share at this time. And I said, boy, Joanna, suppose you have a miscarriage, what would you do? And I said, well, I mean, of course, I'm not really expecting one, right? But you know, I said, well, if anything, I will talk about it, because that's who I am. And so here I am today, you know, really sharing my experience, sharing what I think God has taken me through, and I could say that it's His grace. And you know, sometimes when you say God's grace, you kind of want to feel it inside, like you just want to feel held up. I don't necessarily feel that way, but I know that I'm being held together, like I'm not falling apart, and that's God. And you know, I think as I started to talk to people about it, I recognized that many persons don't know, because I didn't know what a blighted ovum was, which really was where your sac is formed, but there is no embryo that is formed and continues on to develop into a baby. It's called, I think, also an unembryonic pregnancy. And also persons didn't know what an ectopic pregnancy was, which was the baby would be fertilized perhaps in the tube, and very rarely as well in the ovary, you know. And so and then also what I found out was that almost every other woman I spoke to said, you know, I had a miscarriage as well. And I was shocked, because you know, it was not something I knew. Some of these women had other children, and I just didn't know that, you know, miscarriage for them was a part of the process. And I know, you know, even for my I first encountered it with my mother, and she looked like she was okay. And it's not until I was an adult I recognized, oh, but you know, she had to kind of seem that way because we were children. So that's just a little bit of my story. And you know, this space really is about um creating space for diversity of experiences, diversity of responses, because God walks with us both. And He walks with us according to where we are and according to who we are. And so I'm just going to hand over to my friend, Natalie, my sister friend, you know, to share her own story and to share some of what, you know, God has carried her through as she has lived through this process.
Thank you, Jojo. Hi, everybody. There's no one thing I learned. There's no fun way to introduce this topic. Like, hi, everybody. Today was a great day. So I lost a
I
baby.
know,
Like, there's no way to
right?
really frame that as like fun for everyone listening. But let me go back to the beginning. Um, let me go back to the middle. So when I was in college, I was having a lot of pain in my I didn't even know where. It was just in my middle. And after some investigations, we found out that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS or PCOS as it's called. Hi, Shan, who is an expert in dealing with that and helping women through that. Um, and they were very clear that it would be pretty difficult for me to have children naturally without intervention, and that I needed to brace myself for that. And I knew that no matter what it took, I wanted to have children. If I had to adopt, if I had to do IVF, I had no concept of cost or anything. I just knew that I had to have children, right? My friends used to tease me that I looked at babies passing in trolleys like I wanted to steal them, and yes, I did, but not really. But that's how much I knew I wanted to mother. And I did not care how it happened. I wanted to mother. So that was quite a blow. Fast forward in life, the first time I got pregnant with my firstborn, I was nervous because I was like, this is a thing that's not supposed to happen, and now that it has happened, how fragile is it? How scary is it? How in danger are we? So I was, observing by the book that 12-week thing. Don't tell anybody for the first 12 weeks, and I was terrified. And then after the 12 weeks and the 16 weeks. I was still just like, okay, 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 here we go. This could be
Mhm.
real. And then, of course, it was. And so the second time I got pregnant, I was not as afraid, but I was not like, oh, of course this is going to happen. I was like, okay, all right, here we go. And by the time we got to 12 weeks, I had already told a few people. And when we got to 12 weeks, it was just like, let everybody know I'm not waiting until 21, 30 anymore. When I was pregnant with the first child, people would be staring at me with the belly, and I'm like, I don't have anything to say. I don't have any news for you because I was just scared. Um, by the time I got pregnant with my third, I mean, that stick was still just barely settling down into the words pregnant, and I was just like, everybody, I'm having a baby. Because by the third, I was just like, man, we got past the hard part, we got past the hard part, we got past the scared part. At this point, have a pregnancy test, say yes, have a baby. Have a yes, have a baby. Have a yes, have a baby. That's how it works. So I had zero hesitation running around screaming, here comes the baby. And here did not come the baby. The fact that the third one is where I had my miscarriage to this day blows my mind and rocks my world in all the least fun ways possible, because the caution that I had, that was insulating me from terrible news and from taking it as a full body blow. I had none of that. So the shock ran through me and around me and up and down and inside me. I had no inner protections. I had no inner guards. I felt blindsided. I felt robbed. I felt lied to. It's not supposed to be. This is supposed to be a safe baby. This is a safe baby, for crying out loud. The first baby is the scary baby. The second baby is the cautious baby. The third baby is the habit baby. And it was, whew, it leveled me in a way that is very hard to explain. And it's very hard. There weren't many tools available to me. And this is not that long ago. The conversation has advanced in the past, what, just about 8 years? I don't do math. Math hurts. It's a bunch of years. Um, And back then, when I had my loss, I had no established places to go to ask what was this and how do I cope. And a lot of what was out there that I had absorbed told me I did something. You know, how come you were able to have the two babies and with this one you messed up? So of course the brain wants an answer. The brain wants a reason. You can't tell me these things happen. No, they don't. Not to me, they
Mhm.
don't. And if they happen, there has to be a reason that they happen. So what is the reason? And I was just in my head, and in my life, just digging through. Maybe it was the time when I did that, and maybe it was the time when I had that, or ate that, or drank that, or walked this way. You know, you started to
Mhm.
go from the scientific to the absolutely superstitious to the just psychotic, like, and back
Mhm.
again, round and round. You know, what's was it the dress? Is there something in the fabric that like got into my bloodstream and I'm sitting in this dress thinking I look cute all the time? It's poison in my blood. Like it was bad scene. And there was so much available in social commentary
Yeah.
about what a woman is supposed to do, how a woman is supposed to operate and function. Um, you know, the conversation still in this enlightened day of our Lord is the idea that a couple struggling with infertility, the woman needs to sort her life out.
Mhm.
And, this is something that I've said to you before. I think that it's really interesting that the conversation about, a man and woman are united to build the kingdom and have the children for the Lord. And I'm like, yeah, but how come when we talk about having the children, all of a sudden the man disappears from the story and it's what is the woman doing? Since since the man and woman are designed to create children, why isn't the create children conversation about the man and the woman, both of them? Why is it so solidly female oriented that the blame is in us? And some of the studies coming out now that's like, the child is made up of strands of material, and we should look at all the strands that contribute to what makes a healthy pregnancy, what makes a struggle pregnancy, what makes an unsuccessful pregnancy. Um, but none of that was available to me. All that was available to me was weeping into my pillow, wondering how I poisoned myself with nail polish, and just feeling like the worst failure of a woman ever.
Mhm.
And I had to go hunting for a space to take those feelings. And it was in my hunt that I realized that like 1 in 4 women will experience a pregnancy loss. And what they said was it was a will experience a pregnancy loss that she's aware of,
Mhm.
because many times early pregnancy can be lost within the menstrual cycles. So you think you're having a period that might be a little heavier, perhaps a little later, but still just a period. So this is for women who appreciate that they are pregnant, who then
Mhm.
go on to have a miscarriage. 1 in 4. The number would be greater if it was somehow able to scientifically know when a pregnancy has been lost. Um, and that was very helpful for me. I think that was the start of me feeling like I wasn't going to lose my mind. And when I tell you I felt like I was going to lose my mind, I'm not saying, oh, you guys was going crazy. Like it was, it was, it was scary. It
Yeah.
was bad. It was dark. I could not feel my body. Like I could not feel myself as a human. I could not participate in my life. I could not get out of the bed because for me, I lost a child, not a
Yeah.
pregnancy. And I know that's a hot topic in the society now, and I'm absolutely not going there. I'm saying I, Natalie, inside my own personal body, was
Mhm.
immediately a mother of 3, and now I only had 2 of those kids. It was a
Yeah.
loss of a world where I was a mom of
Yeah.
3, and I had to reconcile with never being the mom of that 3. There
Yeah.
was one that was just gone. Um, in the time that I was processing that, humans are magnificent creatures. While I was processing all of that, I was just like very logical, I was like, okay, what's happening now? Okay, and you need to do the scans. Okay, we need to, analyze the tissue. Okay, let's do all of that. And I remember when I went in for my final appointment with my doctor, and they were like, after a procedure like this, because I had to do a DNC,
Mhm.
um, we we usually let the mother relax before we contemplate anything like an IUD. And I was just like, plug it up, plug it up. I'm not doing this again. I'll tell you that right now. Plug it up. I'm not doing this again. I will never risk my heart like this. I will never risk my body like this. And they're like, no, I think you need to. I was like, I think you need to look it up, because either you're going to do it successfully and professionally, or I'm just grabbing things and shoving. So, like, where we at? What we doing? Because I'm not doing this again. I was adamant about that. And I remember at the time there had been a lot happening in my professional life that
Mhm.
ended up becoming a breakup, let's call it. Some people can leave work and it's a not emotional thing. It was a very viscerally emotional thing, and it was a protracted thing. So, of
Mhm.
course, first,
Compounding.
I I missed a lot of the cues that my body was giving me to say, A, first of all, help us. We are not well. This stress is doing things to us. And then also help us. We have somebody on board. As a matter of fact, the last day of my job was the first day of my vacation. And I traveled,
Mhm.
right? Like I left the country immediately, right? And it was while I was away with my friend, and I was just casually being like, "Isn't it funny? I'm having such a weird reaction to travel this time. Like I can't stop puking. It's so funny." And her husband was like, "Do you think perhaps you should check that?" And I was like, "No." Oh, wait, maybe. So I did. I went and I checked that, and I was like, "No, no. Don't play with me, Jesus." I mean, my first reaction was not, hooray, a baby. I was like, I have no job. What are you doing? Like, I'm about to enter the workforce now. I'm about to look for another job after I cool out and relax my brain. And now you want me to be pregnant? Who's going to hire me when I'm pregnant? This is insane. Absolutely not. No, no, no. Not doing it, not doing it, not doing it. All of that lives with me, right?
Mhm.
Because I was like, oh, the baby heard me. And they were like, let me save my mom. The stories we tell ourselves. And then by that evening, I was just like, okay, called my husband and I was like, hey, guess what? And his response was, all right, let's do it, which helped settle me down. And so after a solid day of very reasonable freaking out, I was like, all right, here we go. And I bet this one is a girl. I love my boys, I do, but I wanted a girl. Um, so sitting in the chaos of I was in a toxic work environment. My body was a hostile environment. My first response was a rejection of this baby. Yes,
Mhm.
I did this. I summoned this loss into my body. I made this happen. I'm guilty, and I am actually not eligible for comfort.
Mhm.
Somebody else might be.
Yeah.
Somebody who did all the right things and had all the right responses and was taking all the right precautions and cares of her body. That person deserves sympathy. They deserve to heal. I do not. I deserve to live with this guilt and pain for the rest of my life, and it will never be enough to make up for what I caused. And so it took a lot of me on the outskirts of the healing spaces. It took a lot of me lurking in the blog posts, watching other people talk about how they healed, watching other people give me language that I just didn't have.
Yeah.
And just be like, oh, good for you, Marcia. Not for me. I'm still not allowed to heal, but good for you, Marcia. Good for you, Alexa. Oh, look at them healing. Not me. Good
Mhm.
for you. And somewhere along the lines of living on the outside, being like, must be nice to let this pain go, I really felt we like to imagine that breakthroughs and miracles happen nice and loud. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's confetti, there's at least one angel that we can see with our naked eye. There might be a unicorn, there might be a mermaid, something's
Yeah.
happening, like the mystical world
Sparkly.
ride. It has to be something. The fact that breakthroughs are sometimes simply waking up one morning and not wanting to die,
Yeah.
and you don't know when it happened, and you don't know how it happened. And there was absolutely no noise. As a matter of fact, you're completely alone in the house because everybody has had to wake up and go to work and school, and you have emerged from this cave, and you're like, huh, I don't, I don't hate it that I'm still here today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was like for me. I didn't feel like I was being dragged into healing against my will. I did have some well-meaning people who were just like, better must come. The darkest hours before the dawn. It is to be, what is to be will be. And I was just like,
The platitudes.
yes,
Yeah.
the platitudes, the and I appreciate now even more so many years down the line that platitudes are really about I am uncomfortable with your pain. So I'm trying to calm you down before you make me even more uncomfortable. And I think one of the greatest gifts, to use a weird word in this story, that came onto this for me was my ability to sit in other people's discomfort and to sit in their pain and not absorb it as my own so that I can't even be there for them,
Mm-hmm.
but to recognize it as it reflects my own back at me. Like I remember what that pain was like, it's empathy. The whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, like there is so many stories in the Bible that are God's great works done from a place of empathy,
Yeah.
done from a place of remembering what has been done for us
Yeah.
as we sit with other people as they travel through their own pain, through their own journey. And it doesn't have to look like ours, It doesn't have to, I hope nobody else look like mine. It was messy, my Lord. There were days when I would just like come to my senses and I'm like, have I been sitting on the floor like this? How long have I been here? Who ate the ice cream? Why are there four spoons around me? Like, where did that happen? How did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
My husband would come home and he'd be like, hey, did we shower today? No. Did we eat? No. That's okay. You're doing great. Bless his heart. He did not have an easy way of it either. And to sit with other people's pain and just understand that the journeys that we go on, they don't have to look exactly like each other to be taking us to similar places or
Yeah.
through similar experiences. And sometimes all we need is a witness, just somebody to say, I see you, what you're feeling is what you're feeling, and it is okay that that's what you're feeling, even though the experience is not okay. That's not what we're saying. We're saying it's okay that you're falling apart. It's okay that you're angry. It's okay that all of this is happening. And to repaint the Jesus some of us might have heard about, who is terrified of our feelings.
Yeah.
I'm like, that God,
Yeah.
you know what that God is seeing? Do you know what that God has seen? And he's gonna be like, oh no, there's a lady crying in her bathroom over a lost baby. Take it away. It's too much for me. Like, honestly, like, calm down. This is God. God made the world, but he can't manage anger. God made the world, but he don't want to see you cry. That's just not the experience I have. So anybody who's known me knows that of all of the things I've lived through, the one and two nightmares that I've
The
experienced
one and
have been
two.
one and two little trauma nightmares that I have lived through in my life. I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna tell it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna talk about it
Yeah.
because at the very basicest, somebody has a reflection, somebody has a mirror, somebody can see their journey a little more down the road and see some hope. And at the very most bestest, somebody who's been desperate for somebody to talk to, who they don't have to explain everything from scratch or justify or contextualize. Here I am. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
very good listener,
And that you
and
are. That you
and
are. I, yeah.
I've been given that scope by God to just really sit with the nonsense, just the nonsense of life. I mean, it really is. There's so much
So
nonsense
much.
in life, and I would want to say to anybody who is dealing with this pain, and what I've also learned is the pains don't have to be the same. Yes, I've gone through the absolute devastation of a miscarriage, and um, that's a very specific pain. But that pain has also helped me open up spaces in my own world to sit with experiences that are not miscarriages, that fit in this weird, maybe it only applies to women or primarily to women, or maybe society hasn't talked about it yet and I don't know what to do with this pain, or maybe I go to church, but I don't know if that's a safe space to talk about what's happening with me. All of these spaces that that I have been dragged through by my neck by these
Mm-hmm.
different experiences make me a very interesting vessel. And my friends will say that I have resting, let me help you face, right? Because
The
yes,
it's a sign.
or I mean, this has happened all the time where I'm out with friends, where they're there for coffee, we're there for whatever, and somebody will just come up and be like, "I'm so sorry, we don't know each other, but I just felt like I could talk to you," and I'm like, "Sure." It's happened
It's the
so many
hair.
times. I don't know what it is, but it has happened so many times. I'm just trying to buy bread, I'm just in the supermarket trying to buy some bread. I'm just over here trying to choose a coconut water that won't kill me. Like I'm just living my life, and somebody will come up and like, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry. This is going to seem weird, but," and I'm just like, "It's really not weird anymore. How can
Well,
I
that
help?" Um,
I want to kind of pick up and mention something because I actually forgot about it when you spoke about finding the reasons why this happened, and you could, you had
oh,
like three reasons in your mind why, you may have lost the pregnancy. And I remember I had that experience because just the night before I was talking to God and I'm saying, as you know, my pregnancy symptoms are I can't look at the screen,
mm-hmm.
I have a whole heap of aftertaste. It just feels like torture, right? And I have
You remember?
prenatal, antenatal depression. And I'm saying, God, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, I cannot deal with this. And, I'm like, okay, don't take away the baby. I mean, I think I had a moment, to be honest, right? I'm going to be radically transparent, right?
Radical transparent.
And I did have a moment where I was like, yo, I can't. But I was like, God, don't take the baby. Please take the symptoms, right? Um, and so this was literally, so that was the Thursday I went into emergency surgery, Wednesday. And so when I recognized there was no baby, I was I had a moment of, did I do this? Like, I grew up and my words are powerful, and and my husband, just really helped to remind me that no. And I mean, the truth is, in my brain, I should have kind of known that, to be honest, there was no baby in the first, like, there was no baby before I was crying out to God. So, but just that need for an answer for our experiences, and just how easily it is to look inward, and look at ourselves and kind of blame ourselves for our body's experience. That quite often happens just independently of us. And, no matter what we do, our body often does its own thing. And so, just I think for me, and I think you mentioned it, just being able to hear about the statistic of, how many women actually have miscarriages, and that being some sort of hope that, you didn't do this to yourself, that, you know, yeah, that the body does its own thing.
Yeah. And I really want there to be more spaces. And it's really funny because when I finally shared about my loss, um, I shared near when her, and it was a her. So I was just like, "Lord, why would you take my baby girl?"
Mm,
But when I finally shared, I shared close to when her due date would have been, that I had lost her, and that I would not be welcoming her on the day that I had already been counting down to. And I did that on Facebook, which, yeah, that was a million years ago. Uh, God bless Facebook. And I my inbox was flooded with friends, people I knew who were like, "This happened to me 5 years ago, 4 years ago, earlier this year too." And I was just like,
mhm.
my goodness, there's so many of us, and we don't
Yeah.
have a safe space to talk about it. I remember for me, while I saw the statistics, and I was just like, okay, science, whatever, that's, sure, science, but it's different. You don't understand. These other women had scientific reasons. I'm a bad mom. That's what you need to
Hmm.
understand. I'm a bad mom. That's not my statistic. That's
Yeah.
theirs. I'm a failure. They are not. And I remember I saw an actress from a show that I was really, really invested in at the time. And there was a movement called One in Four back then. And she was one of the faces of it, talking about the fact that she had had a miscarriage. And there was something about seeing a human I could connect to that put a face to the science that was really a big part of me being able to live in those hedge spaces I talked about, where I was just watching the encouragement, but I wasn't receiving it. But it allowed me to think, well, maybe if she says she felt like it was her fault, but it wasn't her fault. Maybe even though I feel like it's my fault, it might not be my fault. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I began to say, let me be a face. Because whether or not you have access to the statistics, it might not land like it didn't land for me. Some of you will be fine. Many people will be fine, but let me be a truthful face to say, hey, this happened to me. These are the things I felt. These are the things that helped. And of course, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it, you know. And in that time, I have been able to, when people, those little days on social media, like have National Daughter Day and da 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 da, and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I, I, it took a few years, like four or so, but after a while, I started saying, I would have had a daughter. She had a name, like we had a name because we lost her at 11 weeks, right? Um, and we had a name. We were ready. This was our baby.
Yeah.
And so to call her name has become a big part of the healing journey. My two boys, two older boys, they know her name.
Yeah.
We know her birthday. We know her name. My beloved friend Dan made an ornament with her name for our Christmas trees. So all of our children are on our Christmas tree. Helena is there. My kids talk about Helena and they say, that's our sister who's in heaven. We'll see her when we're in heaven. Um, and they talk about her as a part of the family. So how many siblings do you have? Well, I have a brother and a sister who's in heaven.
Yeah.
And that's not something I taught them to do. I was simply
Mm-hmm.
open about mommy had a we were gonna have a baby and we didn't. Mommy was sad for many years. That's probably why, if you remember that. And we believe we'll see her again. And I just made it, this is a part of our story as a family. I don't want to hide her. I don't want to make her a secret. Like, I have to sit down with you when you're 18 and be like, here's a shameful secret about your weird mom. Like, I didn't want to make it that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And another fun fact, you can have postpartum depression after an early stage miscarriage. And it might be hard to tell what is me being sad about losing this pregnancy and what is me being sad about losing this pregnancy, plus the hormonal roller coaster I'm still on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have pregnancies where my body, which has a number of medical things, challenges, it tries really hard to control itself when I'm pregnant, right? It's not perfect, but she does her best. She really does as much as she can for the babies. You see, when those babies are out, it's like she's like, "Ooh, I gotta make up for all of that," and she goes nuts. Every metric goes completely catawampus after the babies are out. She's like, "Man, I played my part. Now you gotta pay me back." And so after I had my miscarriage, uh, she was just like, I don't care how long you were pregnant or not pregnant, run me my symptoms. And so she did the whole thing. And I was just like, can you imagine I'm paying this price and I don't even have a baby?
Yeah.
I did not appreciate that. Post postpartum depression could have been a part of why I was so heavy, and it wasn't just guilt, and it wasn't just sorrow, and that really sank home to me when I had my fourth kid, my just baby now, my precious little chum chum. Um, the symptoms that I had after I had him of profound postpartum depression, I was just like, oh,
This is what it was.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh. this this was probably what was happening then too. Yes, a lot of it was guilt, and yes, a lot of it was sorrow from just, the miscarriage. But this postpartum season is what made me go researching. Like, if you have an early stage miscarriage, can you still have postpartum depression? And the science is overwhelming. Yeah, definitely. So it also helps me to put like the final layer to rest just this year, all these
Yeah.
years later, in the context, because I didn't have postpartum depression with the other two at all.
Right.
So the sadness I was feeling, I was like, this is all a reasonable response to having somehow cost my body a baby. This is normal to feel this guilty. But this pregnancy, I was feeling guilty for things like my rational brain was like, what are you talking about? But postpartum brain was just like, shh, let her talk because she is guilty and she should talk about how guilty she is. And so that war in this, for the first time, gave me the context to look back and be like, man, there's so much that happens in a system
And
after a loss. And you talked about, the blighted ovum. And I think that the thing is, as the world continues to devour itself over when life begins and all of those things, moms, people who are expecting babies, and I want to talk about people who are expecting babies through adoption, people
mm,
who are hoping for babies through IVF, people who are expecting babies because they're pregnant or they think they're pregnant. There is something incredible that happens in the expectation space.
yeah.
And when those expectations fall apart, there is a devastation that I don't think we create enough space in society to talk about. Because there was no baby. The mother can change her mind and not give you her baby. Not all IVF procedures are successful. The facts, the clinical stats,
Mm-hmm.
the science of it all, those are good to have, sure. And like I've said before, they're another card to put in the deck that we're shuffling through in our brains. We do need that information. It's not to
Yeah.
poo-poo it, but we don't need to choose science or sentiment. They both exist in a space where a child is expected or hoped for.
Yeah.
So I felt like a mother with my firstborn when those fluttery kicks became a kick. I began to feel it, but I didn't have a context for what it felt like. When I thought for sure I was going to die giving birth to him because I was a good baby. I was a good baby. When I was sure it was going to kill me, I felt that thing chip in that was like, I don't care if I die, I need to get him here safely. Like, my last act is going to be to get this child to safety. It was the first time I understood what that felt
Mm-hmm.
like. When I got pregnant with my second, I felt like a mother fairly early. Not the minute I saw the stick, but close to. When I found out I was pregnant with my third, I was immediately like, oh, good, I'm in the States. Let me just start getting some stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I'll do is I'll ship the rest to my bestie, and then I'll figure out how to get it. So I was already in, I'm I'm gonna have this baby. Like, of course I'm gonna have this baby. And that expectation space creates a story.
Yeah.
And when that story falls apart, it does not matter what was happening with the egg. It doesn't matter what was happening with the transfer. It doesn't matter what was happening with the adoption. When that expectation space falls apart, it leaves a wound. And we
Yeah.
need to be able to be gracious to ourselves who are living in that space and gracious to the people around us who are going through that space. And to allow them to grieve because the same way they love to big up the mothers, oh, mother's heart, oh, mother is just, baby, that don't just happen. So,
Yeah.
so if you want our hearts when they're full and running over with love, you got to take care of those hearts when they're empty and cracked and broken because
Yeah.
that's the same heart.
The same
And we need more
heart.
spaces to recognize that.
Yeah. Yes, and that's. I mean, you said so much, and I can relate to, um, just you find out you lose a baby, but all the symptoms are still there, or you find out. Well, for me, in my case, there was no baby there, and then all the symptoms are there, and getting the clothes. I got clothes from you, and they're still out, and I'm like, and recognizing, okay, but there's no baby, like I had to go back to the doctor afterwards and pass the labor ward, and I recognized, oh, I'm not going to be coming home with a baby this time. you know, and so those things hurt, you know. And you mentioned earlier just about the empathy that God develops. And to be honest, I mean, sometimes I hear the Bible even talks about it, you know. We go through these things and we're comforted so that we can comfort. And I'm just like, but I don't want to comfort. You know, it's like I don't want
No
this
more
experience.
things, please. No more
No more
things.
things. No more things. I'm all things out, you know. But I must say, and I appreciate you sharing your experience, and again, just really holding space here for or the differences in our experiences, the differences in how we process, and but still also being able to recognize God's grace in the big and the small ways. Um, in the, as you said, kind of sitting down in our mess, in our confusion of feelings, the anger and the laughter and the crying, and you don't know what to do yourself. I mean, I think a lot of the times it's like I don't know how to feel. Like, it's like there are emotions here, but I'm not quite sure what it is, and um, but God is there, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to believe that He cares. Like in the midst of it, because as you're talking about with the expectations, you have hopes, you have dreams, you have a vision of what your life is going to be now with this new child, and yeah, then it doesn't happen. So, what are a few words that you would like to share with a mother as we close, who might be just in the middle of it, and feeling as though I really should be over it by now? Like, why can't I just move on? I mean, what would you say to that person?
I would say that while it's difficult to pinpoint a specific day or time on the clock where everything started to turn around for me, I do distinctly remember a day when I said, I'm going to stop trying to get over it. And I actually just allowed myself to sit with the pain. And I was on the floor alone in the house because, ooh, that would have been a rough day for the rest of them too. But I was alone. And I just laid on the floor and I bawled. I bawled the way that people cry for children in the movies and in the news. I let myself cry because before it was just like, so sad. Oh, it's really hard. But the work was on sucking it in and pushing it down because you
Mm-hmm.
did this, you don't deserve to grieve. And then the other things, it wasn't even really a baby yet. And all of these things that was just like, you don't have the right to cry like this was real. And I just shut those voices off. So I think that the day that I was able to say, this was real to me, this was as real as it gets to me, and it is gone, and I am going to grieve like a crazy person if that's what it takes. I am going to lean into this agony. And I just laid on my belly and I bawled until there was no more crying. And that what it was like the next day I could see there might be a day when this doesn't feel like it's going to kill me. But it began with stop trying to not. Just let it
Yeah.
happen. Stop trying to get over it. Stop trying to not be hurt. Stop trying to not cry. Um, you went through something that you are registering as a loss.
Mm-hmm.
So lose it a little and then see what comes next. That would be my top advice.
Yeah.
Secondly, find somebody or find some people. It might be digital people online, social media spaces. It might be good friends in real life, but don't grieve invisibly because grief can do things to us on the turn of a dime. You think I'm fine, and then one day you find yourself driving the car and being like, "Oh, I went over the cliff." Intrusive thoughts, don't let them win. But have a space where you are seen in your grief would be number two. So grieve, one. Two, be seen in your grief so that you can be safe in your grief. Those would be my top two.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nat. Thank you for sharing your experience with me, with us at this time. And just before we close, I'd really just ask you to pray. Pray for mothers and fathers. As I was talking to a father today, sharing my own experience, he's like, we need to also talk more about fathers and how they experience the loss as well. And so, even though we didn't talk about it today, just to also, yeah, pray for the fathers who are supporting the mothers, but also experiencing the loss themselves and having to process that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Lord, we thank you that you are somebody who is so intimately familiar with pain, different types of pain. And so we invite you into this space where people are experiencing pain, particularly around the loss of a family, loss of a child that they were hoping for. I pray, Lord, that you will give them access not just to their grief, but to your grace, to the space that allows the grief to be processed through them and not hold up and turn dark and sour. It is so easy to lock ourselves around the pain and become something dark, but you, oh God, bring light, bring grace, bring healing to the pain. So I pray that everyone walking with this wound within them, Lord, that first thing is they would feel seen. They would understand that they are not alone. They would feel surrounded. They will understand that you are in this with them. And they will feel safe to grieve all the way down to the bone so that you can begin your healing work. I pray that more and more spaces open up around them, possibly even through them, so that not only are they healed as you do your work, but they create spaces for more to access that. We thank you for how excited you are about building community, even when we don't want it for whatever reason, and that your will be done. And we're excited to see it. Thank you for everything you've done, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much, Natalie. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us and sharing this time with us as we share our stories, as Natalie shares her lessons. Um, we appreciate you and we love you and we look forward to what God is doing in our lives. God wants us to heal, he wants us to grow, he wants us to lead, and he has a purpose for all of us, and he will walk with us on that journey at the pace that we allow him to go with us. So have a good night, have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye, everybody.